Geek out. Hey, welcome to another installment of. We're gonna keep that into. Welcome to another installment of From Geek Out with Love. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
I'm Rich.
I'm Garrett.
And this week we're going to be talking about 1981's. That's right, we're in the 80s now.
Oh, shit.
I know, God. For your eyes only. Only for you.
So good.
It's so fucking good. It's my favorite Bond film from the 80s. It's my favorite Bond film with Sir Roger Moore. I know we haven't gotten the License to Kill yet.
Well, there's no accounting for taste.
Okay, that leads me to my next point.
Yeah.
Last episode we had Garrett launch into a passionate diatribe why Moonraker is Roger Moore Bond in Excelsis.
Yeah, my favorite moment on the show so far.
Let's flip the script.
Okay.
Let's have Garrett go on a tear.
Oh, yes.
Why this is this your least favorite Roger Moore film?
This is my least favorite Roger Moore film.
Take it away.
So like basically my issue with this film is that Roger Moore Bond is about excess. Like everything, when he does a one-liner, it's not like half delivered. It's he's got the eyebrow, he's got the pose. There's just smarm reeking out of his pores, everything. And this film is a film about half measures. They want to keep the kind of Roger Moore Bond character, but they kind of, I get it. Moonraker is a little bit over the top, and it's not everybody's bag, but they dial it back so much that it's like having an episode of this show and being like, well, hold on, Jake, no more Randy Newman impressions, Like,
oh no! I forgot to do it for a second. Oh no, you're not going to say that. Fuck you,
there's a certain charm to the other Moore films where they're so crazy, so over the top, and this film still has the camp and still has the kind of gesture towards that, but they just don't want to go all the way, and it's just painful to me to watch because I'm like, even if you don't want to go 110% like in Moonraker, you could at least get like 95, 96% of the way to that kind of insanity, like you see in Spy Who Loved Me, which, there's some craziness in that film, where this one, it just feels like they're making it more restrained for the sake of being more restrained, not because it's actually the right thing to do. They still have this villain who's, they give him the scene where he gets to be, over the top like Jaws, and he demonstrates it by throwing a motorcycle in frustration, which just seems really odd. I don't know.
Yeah,
the
Taylor
film
Swift did that in a recent in the Look What You Made Me Do video. So see how intimidating that is for all you Taylor Swift fans out there.
Yeah. I mean, it. I don't know. This film to me is just basically like they showed up to make a Bond movie, and then like got right up to the edge of it and balked and turned the other way. This is. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad film in itself, but like when I'm thinking James Bond, I think this film kind of instills almost a cowardice in the production team that doesn't really go away, I don't think, until like GoldenEye, where is the first film after this where you're really thinking big, I guess. I take that back with Christopher Walken, but I mean I think a lot of that is just because Christopher Walken is going to take any movie off the rails to an extent. But I don't know. Yeah. I can't get behind it just because I feel like it's born from a calculation that is not like an artistic direction. It feels like a movie designed in a boardroom to me.
To be fair, a lot of Roger Moore films are movies like we've talked about Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun, Moonraker, this, and there's definitely some ulterior, or they're taking into account the stuff that's going on around them. I think with For Your Eyes Only, to that point, the idea that For Your Eyes Only kicks off a streak of films that are kind of the same oeuvre, if I may. They're all the Bond films from here until GoldenEye are directed by the same guy. They're all the Bond films in the 80s are directed by John Glenn.
Yeah, and I guess like another thing there is that I'm not really a huge fan of spoilers, but I'm not really a huge fan of any of the films that succeed this up until Goldeneye. There's a few in there that I'm okay with, but none of them I'm really like, oh, you got to watch this film up until you get to Goldeneye, and there is this kind of change in tone that to me felt like it feels more that film feels more like the earlier Moore films that I love so much than it does the later ones, or even a lot of the films that come after that.
Well, it kind of makes sense that you wouldn't be a fan of this because this movie is like the anti-Moonraker, definitely in Moore's era,
Very consciously.
And everything you said about the movie is very true. Like, and we kind of hinted at this last episode. Like, nothing about this movie should work because it doesn't work when any other Bond actor they do it to any other Bond actor. They change tone, but for some reason, I love it. Like, and I think a lot of that has to do with I prefer Bond being more cold-hearted. And again, like Garrett, you were saying, we say cold-hearted Bond. Like this, okay, for Roger Moore, it's cold-hearted, but it's not that cold-hearted. Like, it's still goofy as shit. But
he still randomly fights like ice hockey players.
Yeah, like it's very fucking, it's very goofy. Now,
and it's shit like that. Like that, the ice hockey scene is one of the things that I hate the most about this film, because like in one of the earlier Bond films, that would have been some really wacky shit.
Mm-hmm.
That we would have had a good laugh about it, but at the end of the day, if it comes on the screen, you're like, oh, this is fun to watch at the very least. Where like that scene winds up being painful for me to watch.
Yeah, and I think we were saying, Sam, like this is the first time Moore starts to really look his age in the Bond.
He's starting to he's wearing the Mr. Rogers sweaters.
Oh yeah,
he's got some paunch to him.
Be my neighbor. Yeah, I think because it went more cold-hearted, I was fine with it. Like, if they would have made a Timothy Dalton Bond movie where they're like, all right, now you're gonna be goofy as shit, I'd probably feel like Garrett does about this, like just what the hell. But this is kind of the beginning. I mean, the 80s very much are the era of Bond where, like, they don't... And as much as I love Dalton was such a confused era. Like, they never really... And again, even, you look back to Connery. I remember, I think we were talking about this with one of my buddies outside the podcast. Like, Goldfinger's the movie that cements everything with Bond. And it's like look at Spy Who Loved Me, the third one, is the one that cemented everything for Roger Moore. It's not the case for Pierce Brosnan at all, obviously. But I think that comes out of, that's basically the third Timothy Dalton movie. You know what I mean? Like, I would have been interested, and we'll save most of it for the Dalton stuff, obviously, but I would have loved to have seen what, like, the third Dalton movie would have been like with him in it. The 80s are kind of like a really weird misstep Bond era. As much as I love the Dalton era, as much as I love this movie in particular for Moore, it's like they're kind of just, like I guess you were kind of saying this too, Garrett. Like they don't necessarily commit, and then they do with License to Kill, and it's like, what the fuck is this? It's so violent and insane. This is supposed to be like a summer blockbuster for kids, and hearts are being cut out and shit. So yeah, it
was never meant for kids.
Yeah, that's right. That's
It
wasn't meant for 6-year-olds.
I think that's like, again, we'll get to that when we get to that. But I think, like, one of the things there is that the more of it I think about that, and the more of it I like look back at the Dalton films, I think it's clear that Dalton had a very different idea of who Bond was than anybody else ever involved with the production did. But
he paved the way. He paved the way for Craig big time.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, it's kind of a predecessor to that. But up until Casino Royale, I mean, it's just a very different take than anyone had ever thought to do. Mm-hmm. But one of the things with Moore is that, I don't know, in this film, yeah, he is starting to show his age, but he's still not like, I don't think he's phoning it in. No. He's still having fun with it.
Yeah, definitely not phoning it in.
I don't think he starts to phone it in for another film or two. Are there even two left?
Yeah, he's got Octopussy and
Yeah. Like Octopussy has moments, but in this film he's still there. He's still Bond. He's still having a good time, and you can tell, even though he's getting old, you can still tell that, this is recognizably the same guy, which again is probably why it's so much of a shock to me, because you go from lasers and Jaws to the biathlon and that weird creepy dude. I don't even remember his name. That's how much I hate this movie.
I think that this movie's kind of a product of, this is his 5th movie at this point. They've ran out of things to do with him. Like they've put him in space, they've thrown him in big cities, they've put him all over the world, and this movie seems like it's just a collection. Like, I really enjoy this movie because it follows Moonraker, which I did not enjoy. But like, this is where it seems like they tried to get a little bit of everything that is James Bond. Like, kind of how they threw everything into Spectre that you'd see in 50 years. And that's what I think they did right, because they had the right Bond. It followed a movie that was probably by and large disappointing to the majority of the fan base. You still had a Bond that cared. But I mean, you've got everything from car chases to underwater film sequences. Everything is in this movie, but the movie never really had, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess the theme is kind of revenge, as showcased by the very first 5 minutes of the movie. But it never felt like there was like a distinct, I don't know, maybe like feel to this movie, or like theme. I know revenge is kind of is a theme, but I don't know the best way to describe it. But it feels more like a collection of cool things that goes on that is traditional in the Bond lore, where it doesn't go to the Moonraker extents, but manages to hit all of its beats. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Speaking of that opening, there's this YouTube Bond channel that I am a subscriber of. I can't remember their name, which is terrible, but they were saying how that opening scene you're talking about, where there's finally revenge on Blofeld. That's not Blofeld. Once they got the rights back, he's now credited in like IMDb as Blofeld. Like, before he wasn't. Even though he clearly was.
For him.
Yeah. It's good for him, bald man, and Mr. Bond! Mr. Bond!
I'll buy you a delicatessen.
Get you a delicatessen!
Yeah.
In stainless steel.
And they can't fucking quit with the sound effects. Like, boo!
And then it becomes, what's her, Sheena
Sheena
Easton.
Easton. Oh, man. Every dad's favorite woman. My dad is in love with Sheena Easton, man. Holy crap. Like, I was playing it. I was like packing. I watched it a while ago. I was packing before I was going on a trip. I just had it on the background as I was like packing up and stuff. And my dad's like, "Hey, checking on this. Hey, what time are you going to the airport tomorrow?" And like the opening credits, where she's still the only Bond singer to show up in the credits because of Sheena Easton. And he like stuck his head in for a second and saw Sheena Easton. He was like, "Yeah, I like this one." And he like walked out. Probably has no idea who the actor is in it. Has probably never even seen the movie. He just knows Sheena Easton because Sheena Easton. Yeah, I love the theme.
Oh, it's one of my favorite themes.
It's one of the all-time great themes.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Only for you.
Yeah, it's damn good.
Yeah. See,
probably the best part of this film.
Yeah. It's I mean, I dig the opening. I dig it's my favorite. It's the Moore film that takes itself the most, ostensibly anyway, the most seriously. It's got, like Rich was saying, it's got a lot of the classic Bond isms. It's got, a ski chase. It's got a car chase, and like a conventional car chase. Like they're just getting around in that Citroen, being
that yellow car.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he has the Lotus that like if someone would tap on the window, the fucking car explodes. Yeah. So it's like, could you imagine he's at like a movie theater and someone like bumps into it or fucks up, and they fucking blows up and kills like 10 people in a parking lot, and he's like, oh.
Still throws away the keys.
Yeah, he throws away the
I love that sequence because, like, I mean, it's a very clear statement that, like, look, but he's Bond even without the Lotus, even without the gadget-laden car. And it's got one of my favorite Roger Moore images where, like, the dude pulls up next to the Citroen while they're driving, and he just kind of, like, gives them, like, the fucking Roger Moore douchebag face.
Yeah.
That's the quintessential Roger Moore douchebag.
Yeah, he says Bond, James Bond without saying Bond, James Bond with that look.
Yeah.
Like he drives by, he's like, Bond, James Bond.
Because of that one image, and Garrett can verify this because we lived together in college, my Xbox Live gamer tag for the longest time was Roger Moore DB face.
Yep.
Jesus.
All
That's good.
inspired by that one image. The underwater sequences, I think they move along. They're a lot better than they are in Thunderball. I can tell you that.
That's not hard though. I mean, I guess like the thing is like every time somebody says something nice about this film, it's never in its own right. It's always like, oh well, this is better than that other thing, or if you look at something else, this isn't that bad. It's always relative. For Your Eyes Only is never talked about as a good film in its own right. It's talked about because people didn't like Moonraker, or in context of something else, it's pretty good. I very rarely hear someone outright say, I like this movie as a movie in its own right. And I do kind of have to say that like it's always kind of surprised me, Sam, that you like this film in particular, because when you have like you're a guy who likes some films that would be considered pretty objectively terrible. Like I'm talking about stuff like Commando by the Arnold Schwarzenegger. Whoa. Hold on. Like hear me out. From a critical perspective, it's a bad film. But it's a lot of fun to watch.
Recall.
It's a fucking amazing movie because it leans in so hard to its strengths. And For Your Eyes Only is a film that just doesn't do that. There are some things that they can play off of, and they just they give it lip service. And there are all those things. You got the ski chase, you got the underwater scene, you got the car chase, you got all this stuff. But they never really take that step to do something awesome. They just kind of do something that'll sell tickets and not really offend anybody, but it doesn't really. I don't think it winds up creating something that stands on its own two legs.
Could this be a product of Cubby getting towards the end and wanting to make something more traditional in the vein of Connery?
Well, I mean, like we were saying, it's very much a reaction to.
Oh yeah, it's 100% a reaction, and it's funny because you're talking to Garrett. I mean, it kind of proves. I guess this proves the point. Like, I think it'd be hard to find like anyone who loves Moonraker, is most likely not going to love For Your Eyes Only, and vice versa. And I think you're totally right too, Garrett, where it's like so many times where I've told people about For Your Eyes Only, like when I talk about The Spy You Love Me, I'm not like, The Spy You Love Me is great because it's changing things up. It's like, no, The Spy You Love Me is great because it's like the perfect Roger Moore Bond movie.
It's fucking awesome.
For Your Eyes Only, I've realized now that you said, I'm like, it's because it's the most serious Roger Moore movie. And it's like that should be me saying my favorite Daniel Craig movie is Spectre because it's the most goofy Daniel Craig movie. Like it makes no sense why I like For Eyes Only. Only reason I can think why is because I'm more of a fan of the cold-blooded stuff. And again, the only reason I say this is cold-blooded is because he kicks a car off a fucking cliff,
which he didn't want to do.
Yeah. Which again says it all. Like that's fucking says everything about this movie. Like this movie
gets run over by a dune buggy.
Yeah, but I mean in terms of like Bond kill, like that's the here's your fucking pin, kicks him over.
Originally he was like, my Bond wouldn't do that. The weight of the pin would weigh the car.
And it's like, and it's kind of implied. Like he throws the pin. It's like, and like he basically kicks it as it's already going off. But it's still a great visual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's kind of blowing my mind where it's like I've never just been like, I love For Your Eyes Only because it's a great movie. I have always said it's because it's the most serious, badass Roger Moore movie. And by badass, I mean he kicks a car that's already falling off a cliff.
Yeah. I mean, Rich, you've kind of, what are your kind of, you've hinted at it, but what are your kind of macro or thoughts overall about For Your Eyes Only?
I mean, I like it. It's kind of it's probably my second favorite Moore movie behind The Spy Who Loved Me. It's nice seeing the closure that he kind of gets at the beginning of the movie with Blofeld. So I mean, with you being such a big On Her Majesty's Secret Service fan, I can imagine you appreciating that. But the one thing that stands out apart from, like, if you take the plot, the scenes, all that out, is Bond is 20 years old at this point in the theaters.
Yeah.
Right? The first one came out in 61.
62, so it's just about
62.
20 years old.
So it's just about 20 years old. Like, when you start to look at, like, the people that have been around the longest at this point, like Lois Maxwell is old as hell, still as Moneypenny.
Yeah.
You know, like, there are certain things that when you look back on it, I guess if you had been watching these movies, since the beginning, since the 60s, you'd be sitting there going, wow, this has been around for 20 years. Like, not only did this have staying power, but it doesn't really show any sign of stopping.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the movie makes 200 million or somewhere in that ballpark. So the only thing for me, like, when you watch these chronologically, it's, well, what more can you do? Like, where can you go beyond this? And I think, to Garrett's point, they don't really figure that out until the Cold War's over, until they get to Brosnan.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I think about the franchise as a whole at this point in time. I mean, there's just been this is the beginning, or kind of the middle, where things kind of get very repetitive very quickly.
That's an interesting point to make. Like, a couple days ago at this point, my job where I work at had like a Bond night, and we watched Goldfinger on one of the movie theater screens that we have at work. And I was talking to a couple of the older guys that work in the guest services department. And I was like, hey, you guys going to stick around? Because they had like cocktails and like food and sandwiches and stuff. I was like, you guys going to stick around? And they were like, no, like, we saw this when it came out when we were like 15. They're like in their late 60s now or whatever. Like, no, we went on like dates and stuff. So it's interesting to think, like, say they're 15 when Dr. No comes out. They're what, almost 30 or 30? They're mid 30s at this point. Like, they have, they're it's interesting to think of that. Like, I've never really thought of that, of like the target audience, or like the that age group, really growing up, and where they're at now, 35-year-olds or 40-year-olds if you're 20 when you saw it. Like, where
it's like the difference between GoldenEye and Spectre for us.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, wow, that's crazy.
But I think that's kind of also getting to another point about when they get to the Dalton years and how violent and dark and gritty those movies get. When you see the Connery movies at 15 years old, and you remember seeing them as a kid.
Yeah.
And then you're at the point where maybe, you're 40 years old or whatever, and you've got a 10 or 11-year-old son, and you bring them to a Dalton movie. You'd sit there going, wow, I don't know why I would bring my child to this. I mean, granted, it's still a James Bond film. I probably, if I had a kid, I probably wouldn't have a problem showing it to a 10-year-old, but you can see where that backlash would come from.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that it was such a departure, and it was ahead of its time, because you look at the Craig stuff now, and it's it's pretty brutal and violent and kind of unrelenting at certain points, especially a movie like Casino Royale.
I think it's a different kind of violence, though.
What is? I mean, again, like, so much of what we've
More grounded.
yeah, so much of what we've
it's also much more sanitary.
Sure.
Like,
you're talking about the Craig stuff?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, 80s Bond is dealing with like drug cartels. You know what I mean? Like, overall, like, not every Bond movie, obviously, that's really License to Kill, but like dealing with like
he deals with like opium dealers.
That's
in this
true.
one.
That's true. But like, Bond, that is kind of like the 80s Bond,
Yes,
and
I smuggle, yes, but no people, no heroin.
But yeah. I mean, License to Kill Bond has like, it's not sanitary at all. I mean, heads are exploding and balloon head.
Sanchez.
Yeah, and he's like, what should we do with it? Launder it. And you're like, fuck you. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we go from we it's if we're thinking about era, 70s is
80s,
it's pretty goofy.
Yeah. 80s Bond is, again, it's all directed by the same guy.
Yeah.
And it's very much kind of, they all kind of have that style.
Yes.
It's almost like,
Grit.
yeah.
Even, A View to a Kill. You know?
Yeah, even in the more ridiculous moments of A View to a Kill, and there's a lot. There's a
Mhm.
fucking Beach Boys song that plays in the opening.
Mhm.
There's still. I'm trying to identify that. What is that je ne sais quoi about the John Glenn Bond films? It almost feels like. I mean, it makes sense given the pedigree behind it, but it almost feels like a British like television series from the same period, like almost like.
To me, they just feel like he's trying too hard.
Interesting.
Like, I don't know. Like, there's a certain, kind of the Bond films up to this point, kind of, I guess Moonraker accepted, but most of them feel, just really good. There's a few stinkers in there. You've got You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever, but for the most part, they're
Man with the Golden Gun.
even as much as I don't like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, there's a lot of good things to be said about that film. But like, I don't know, watching them, there's a feel to which they almost seem like they leapt onto the screen fully formed as if from the brow of Zeus, right? Like Goldfinger, just front to back. I don't know. I don't want to say it feels effortless, but like it's like a lot of those films just seem like they just happened, and they just happened really well.
Lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, where most of these films in the 80s just feel like it's somebody else who saw what happened in the past and is like, man, I wish I could do that. And, he's trying and he's giving it a shot, but he never quite captures it.
Well, at this point, they're out of novels. By and large, they're trying to adapt short stories into feature-length films. So a lot of the, quote-unquote source scripts have already been made.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, also, you look at some of the films, a good number of the films or the previous films are drastic departures from their source material.
Especially the
I guess,
last,
again,
like,
Moonraker
three.
is the big one, but, there's...
It's interesting that you bring that up because there's a lot of literary things, like the idea of Bond being dragged by a speedboat or a big boat. It's bigger than a speedboat.
Mm-hmm.
Comes from the novel of Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like little like elements from like Risico, the short story Risico, that show up here.
I don't know, like it just feels like to me, like I get that they've run out of the source material. I get that there's no more novels to make. But I don't think that any of the previous films, well, many of the previous films anyway, were that tightly wedded to their source material. Mm-hmm. And, it just seems to me like they're trying to replicate something now, and just for whatever reason, the new guys coming in to do it just haven't quite figured it out.
Because, again, Bond is so much a reflection of its time. Would you say that the 80s Bond is a reflection of kind of the pedigree of the 80s action movie, where it's like, you look at think of like the action movies and like the kind of like filmmaking of the 60s, and then the 70s, but then you look at the 80s where like you're talking about like a movie like Commando, which, look, I love Commando, but it's not high art, and so the Bond movies seem to be, again, a reflection of the action movies that are happening at the time. And the action movies of the 80s, of course, there's great ones. There's ones that are kind of like, that change the game, revolutionize stuff, Die Hard and stuff. But then like you look at so much of the 80s action movies are, big explosions and a lot of squibs. And
well, yeah, but I mean, the Bond films have always, even when they don't succeed at it, they've always had this pretension of being something more than that. They are blockbuster films. They are action-packed spectacles, but even when they don't quite meet the mark, they've always kind of gestured towards having a little bit more substance than something like Commando.
Yeah.
And it's clear in getting back to this film in particular, it's clear that they're trying to have that substance so that they're not all spectacle. But I think that the conscious decision to dial back the spectacle kind of hurts them on both aspects.
Yeah, I also think the 80s, especially like, I know we're kind of jumping around, but like with a movie like License to Kill, that kind of killed the mission statement, not entirely, but I think that kind of killed the mission statement of let's make a summer blockbuster, and they decided with like Goldfinger, let's make a James Bond movie. And I think that has been more the driving force. Now, of course, you get like Die Another Day, which is just excess and insane. But
I was going to say, like, I think they lose that mission again.
They do, but then you get Martin
quickly.
Campbell back, and he does a Casino Royale, and they make a Bond movie. That's why I honestly think, once Bond 25 is done and Craig is done, Martin Campbell should direct the beginning of the next Bond. Because, I mean, I think he's, like, locked that position in for life. Because, like, I think his, like, he's done it with the past two, and they did in their classics. And I think they really helped define what Craig, or not Craig, what the Bond actor should be. Do they always follow it? No, but I would love for the next new Bond to be another Martin Campbell directed movie. But I don't know, like just kind of like spitballing about like 80s Bond in general and like ways I haven't really thought about it. Like it is weird because they don't necessarily have both hands on the steering wheel. Like you said, they're like, I think this is a movie where they are trying to get back to substance Bond as opposed to being in space shooting lasers Bond.
But I guess like the thing is that like the really great Bond films always have like a synergistic relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
Goldfinger is not fun. It's not such a great film just because it's high art or whatever. This kind of over the top villain who in context of the later films, he's a little bit tame, but at the time he's kind of a crazy dude,
mm-hmm.
And this idea that James Bond is not a all too human, fallible spy or whatever. If I want to watch that, I'll go look at the news and just watch how the spy agencies are messing up this week, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you want to get a little bit more out there, there's stuff like Jason Bourne, that sort of stuff. They're more grounded. James Bond is at his best when he makes it look easy, even when it's not, and when it's clearly not easy for him. You have the great Connery films. Even at times when he looks vulnerable-ish, he's still kind of putting on the good face and making it work. Roger Moore doesn't have the ability to look like he's vulnerable, but I guess the really good Bond films are not about the pedestrian and the everyday and the being on the ground aspects of the kind of Hollywood super spy. It's more about the high flying international man of mystery and that sort of thing that this movie just lacks, I feel like.
That's funny you say that because like that you pretty much described the anti-80s Bond.
Which is like why this is like your least favorite period.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because
pretty much.
He does some wacky shit.
Again, yeah, he definitely does wacky. He's a clown. He's a goddamn clown. But like,
damn it, there's a bomb in there.
but
he's not like a real. He's Pagliacci basically.
Yeah, yeah. But again, yes, the '80s Bond is getting away from, and maybe I guess just as a tease for like the end, the next two Moore movies, are you on the same level with the next two Moore films as you are with For Your Eyes Only?
I'm not the biggest fan of Octopussy. That's the one, like the reason why I never remember that film. I'm not really the biggest fan of it. View to a Kill, I go back and forth on because there's a lot of stuff in there that really feels like kind of a nod towards the Bond that I used to know.
Sure.
But
the last gasp.
It does, like it leans into it, but not quite as hard as I'd like.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
Sam, since you love this movie so much, where would you put this in? Like your all-time, not an exact number, but like where? Like, is this in your top 5, in your top 7?
It's not in my top 5. It's certainly in my top 10, it would probably go, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Skyfall, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love. Oh shit, maybe it is in my top 5. No, Casino Royale would take the number 5 slot, so it gets like it's lucky number 6.
There you go.
So again, it's my favorite from the decade. It's my favorite with Sir Roger. I kind of like the world weary Roger Moore. I will say my least favorite thing, my 2 least favorite things in the film, the hockey scene's fucking dumb, as we've established.
Awful.
Yeah, the fucking dun 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 dun, like the horn. Like first off, who's ringing the horn?
Oh yeah, by the way, speaking of wonderful music like that, fucking Bill Conti does the score for this.
Oh yeah,
Mr. Rocky Balboa himself. Well, not Mr. Rocky Balboa himself, but Mr. Rocky Balboa himself.
He does it right before he does the soundtrack for Rocky 3, which is my favorite Rocky film. But the music during the car chase and during the ski chase, top notch.
It's Conti, baby.
That's the Conti effect. Blondie Blondie was originally supposed to do the theme for this, but when they found out that they would have to share a songwriting credit with Bill Conti, they were like, no.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
It's in love, you're for eyes only. It's in love, his name is Bond.
Did you know that Julian Glover, the villain in this movie, was I guess a
I know
finalist
Julian
to
Glover.
be Bond for Live and Let Die?
Yeah, but the irony is like they didn't because Roger Moore, his contract ended with Spy Who Loved Me, so he negotiated, and there was some trepidation about him coming back for this one because he's like 54 in this movie.
Julian Glover. What is happening to me? Scariest death scene.
I told you not to trust anyone, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, the scariest death
Looks
scene.
like Hitler has declared war on the Joneses. Low sparring.
He's also in Empire Strikes Back.
The clothes of the Grail can save him now.
Yeah.
He's also in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He gets he has sex and then he gets stabbed to death by a bunch of
Oh,
children.
it's like, get off me, you fucking kids! That's right, he does get stabbed to death.
No, not Mr. Raymond. He's that fuck in the King's Landing.
Yeah, like it's
Dude, he's got a career, man.
yeah.
The 80s were good to Julian Glover.
The crazy thing is, so
is the AT-AT commander. Or
yeah.
whatever.
You may,
Mr. Pycelle, that's what it was.
yeah, you may fire when ready.
Yeah,
but the
if I when ready.
the motherfucker. He was when they approached him for Live and Let Die. They're like, he's maybe too young. When they approach him, when he's up for potentially for Your Eyes Only, they're like, he's too old. Make him the bad guy, which is supposed to be like a World War II vet in this movie. And Roger Moore is older than the guy that plays Bill Tanner, which is why you never see him again after this movie.
Yep.
He's older than Julian Glover. I'm pretty sure he's older than the guy that plays Topol, the guy that eats the fucking pistachios.
Yeah.
You have what the Greeks call thrasos, guts. By the end, we be good friends. I always like that, and it's
Sure.
I like the gunfight in the warehouse, but the two.
Oh yeah.
So I fucking hate the hockey scene, which is mercifully pretty short.
I'm gonna be honest with you. If you like the hockey scene, you should just turn yourself in because you're nuts.
Well, fair enough. And the other thing I don't like, I never really was sold on the rock climbing stunt. It goes too long.
It does. I do remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it does. It does go pretty long.
I just don't give a
You know
shit
what would have
about
been awesome in the rock climbing stunt?
that.
Some fucking gadgets.
Yeah. They can't afford to shell out for Q Branch is going through a bit of all they have is they spend all their money on the identigraph. I said a nose, not a banana.
Oh
Q.
yeah, and he does. Nobody does it better on the keypad.
Yeah.
Q's like den 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 den, and then Roger Moore stops. Roger Moore pauses. He has the best pause game of all time, and he stops. And he's like, bum bum bum. And then I think we talked about speaking of music cues. Don't they have a The Spy Who Loved Me? Did we mention the Close Encounters
Yes.
nod? Is it Spy Who Loved Me?
No, it's
right?
Moonraker.
Moonraker. That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, just like 2001, they also spracked Zarathustra. Yeah, those are the. Apart from that, also, Garrett keeps harping on the East German Aryan man. He goes out like a fucking chump in this movie.
Yeah.
He's just holding a fucking windowsill, and Roger Moore
He does everything like a chump.
Shit.
Does he have a good scene in this film?
He kind of looks
It was
like
a weak fight scene at the end.
Like he's like, I don't know. Like that's the thing is like he's clearly he just feels like that guy compared to Jaws is just like that sums up. You know, if that guy were just Jaws again for no reason, like how much cooler would this movie
he would have
be?
survived the car falling off the cliff. He just would have got up and dusted himself off and walked away.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Or just like, you know, the things he would have done. You know, never would I think that, you know, we need to go back to the guy who plays Jaws to get the appropriate gravitas for the role. But I mean, like, yeah, it's just like everything about that guy just reeks of half-assed.
just kind of like we need a giant hulking villain like the dude in You Only Live Twice that gets eaten by piranha fish.
Mm-hmm.
And let's make him an Odessa route Nazi just 'cause.
Yeah, yeah. But he's also really good at skiing, and he's a sniper, but he only uses the sniper rifle in, like, northern Italy, and then he's just, like, buff for the rest of the
And then he
movie.
forgets how to use it for the rest
He also
of the
kind of
movie.
looks like young Warren Zevon.
Sure.
So he's got that going for him. Because I like Warren Zevon.
Okay. What's your guy? What we've kind of, like, we've deconstructed this a bit. Putting it back together, what do you think this film does very well? Where do you think it excels?
Well, so much of what I think it excels at, Garrett has masterfully made me realize that it's all wrong. Like, you know, the tone of it. I think it's a strong, really strong performance by Roger Moore. Like it's real, and again because he knew how to, because you know. He's kind of exactly the same. Like Moonraker is what's goofy. He's just fucking Bond. He's just normal Bond. It's this, you know, the circumstances around him. He's like, I'm in space. Shit. Now I'm climbing a fucking mountain, or you know, the cliff.
That's a mountain. It's like this weird ass like.
Yeah, it's just long. That is true. That scene feels like fucking forever.
Yeah.
For me, it's like way too long. No, but I mean, like, just overall, like, I think the movie overall works really well.
It's eminently watchable.
Yes. I enjoy. I mean, you got the Bond girl has, you know, her revenge aspect of it with her parents being, you know, killed.
Melina Havelock.
Yes, her.
And 007, don't muck it up again.
Don't muck it up. I like that he's got such an aggressive fucking Lotus.
You like that the Lotus just ripped?
Just a fucking toddler could accidentally knock into it on a shot, like, you know, and fucking Bond destroys.
And that's what you get.
That's what you fucking get for messing with the Lotus.
Burglar protected.
Yeah, and he throws the key. He's like, oh, shit. Another one bites the dust.
Is that album is fucking Jazz out at this point?
Well, it's not on Jazz, but
what's
Jazz
the
is
game.
79.
That's
The
right,
game is yes.
Yeah, because I know Garrett's been listening to Queen lately.
Good. Very good.
Yeah,
What's your favorite Queen album?
that's an excellent question. It's hard to pin down.
Yeah. Oh, just like Bond, they have their eras. You know, some people, you know, 70s is pretty hard rocking, and 80s is pretty hard dancing.
At this point, I mean, Queen's at the height of their game, and When For Your Eyes Only comes out.
They're about to break up at this point.
That's right. Yeah, it's Live Aid that saves them.
Yeah. They're on tough times because they're ready to call it quits. Yeah, and then Live Aid saves it. Because they released It's the Kind of Magic. They should have done a fucking Bond theme. Could you imagine? That would have been the most bombastic.
I was just about to say the exact same thing.
They should have done if they would have done a Bond theme in 81, it would have been very dance heavy. If they would have done one when Octopus is 83,
Yeah.
it still would have been dance heavy.
But it would have been baller as fuck.
Yeah.
It would have been better than All Time High. An All Time High.
85 would have, they would have, 85 would have been an ass kicker.
But I also love Duran Duran's View to a Kill.
Dun, 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 dun. So aggressive.
Yeah.
Meeting you is a view to a kill.
This one,
to facing different. But if you just like staccato whatever word you're saying, you're good.
yeah, you're Duran Duran.
Yeah, you're Duran Duran.
All of them just
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Garrett, Rich, what do you think? Where do you think this film succeeds?
So, this film is the moss that grows on the tree that lets you know where the sun is.
What the fuck?
It sounds smart enough for me. I ain't gonna question it.
Okay. I mean, as somebody who didn't enjoy Moonraker, I found this to be very watchable. I think that, Jake, you've always said that if you're doing something, the Roger Moore Bonds are the best Bond movies to have on in the background.
Yeah, definitely.
I think this epitomizes that.
Okay.
And
I had it on when I was packing, so that makes sense.
Yeah, there you go. I think that the underwater scene where they're being dragged by the rope, I thought that was shot really well. I really enjoyed that scene. That's something that sticks out. And the very first scene, the open, is cool. It's a nice little throwback to the Bonds of yesteryear at this point. It's just this is the last one in a while that I think that a majority of people can sit out there and say that they either really enjoy or they found it to be a good movie, or like there's a greater increasing amount of individuals, I think, going forward that have to deflect when answering a question as to why you liked Octopussy. Oh, well, it wasn't as bad as Never Say Never Again. And then you get to the rest of the 80s and we're having that conversation about, kind of the way that the movies went in the 80s. Maybe they didn't know what they wanted to be. They couldn't execute perfectly, this, that, or whatever. So I do look forward to discussing the next couple of movies with that in mind.
I was also thinking about shit I didn't like. I don't like the Margaret Thatcher ending. Fuck the Margaret Thatcher ending. Like, what the fuck is that doing in there? You got fucking Margaret Thatcher and talking to a parrot.
Gotta kiss ass to the PM.
It's fucking terrible is what it is. I'm probably, maybe exposing my hand when I say this. When I was watching this film for research, I might have dozed off like once or twice.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. But I still love it.
This is the Bond movie I fall asleep to.
To be fair, this would have been the perfect Bond movie for Moore to call it quits.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was even more reticent to come back for Octopussy. They just upped his offer when they found out Sean Connery was making his own Bond movie. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, fuck it, fine. I'll do it. I got nothing
That's when they should have had little-known Pierce, because this was the movie where Cubby first met Pierce Brosnan.
That's right, because he's married.
Pierce's then wife was in the movie, and he had lunch with him.
That's right. He's the husband to the woman that, as you pointed out earlier, gets totally annihilated by a dune buggy.
By a dune buggy.
Yeah, that is a
Old
pretty...
dune buggy Brosnan.
That's what they call him in the 80s when he's not Remington Steele. Or the guy from Taffin. I guess his name's Taffin.
Yeah.
I have that movie on DVD because of, as Garrett so succinctly put it, I maybe have films that are,
shit
regarded as maybe, subpar.
The only thing that surprises me is that you only have one copy of it.
It's a winner. Maybe I'll, Rich, do you want to borrow it? I'll bring it to your birthday.
Which one is this?
Taffin.
I don't think I've ever even seen it.
Oh, you're in for not a good time to be sure, but you're in for
a time.
It's got Allison Doody in it.
It does.
Oh my girl.
Peak duty.
This is the next podcast, the filmography of Allison Doody called Peak Duty.
Taffin, Last Crusade, and Major League 2.
And View to a Kill.
Shit.
Oh, that's right.
Shit.
You get all the hits. North and South, I think. Maybe.
I can get it, Indy. I can get it.
I can reach it.
Elsa, honey, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to give me your hand.
Yeah. And then it always annoyed me that fucking Indiana Jones sees that happen. And then he immediately is like, I can reach it.
Dad, I can reach it.
Indiana,
Indiana.
let it go. He's like, shit.
But yeah, any final thoughts on For Your Eyes Only as we put this one to bed?
Solid.
Yeah, watchable.
The moss.
It's, you know what's funny though about this? Now that I think about it, after we discussed it for the last half hour or so, this excludes Garrett's opinion of it. Through no offense, but when you talk about all of the great Bonds or the worst Bond movies, no one ever mentions this. Like there's not a large population of people that I know that, man, this is phenomenal. This is one of the greatest things ever that I've ever seen in the Bond franchise. Like, Sam, you're an exception, I think, on that end. And there's not a lot of people that I think go, this movie just fucking sucks. Everything about it was wrong. Moore sucked. The villain sucked. It's very much just a middle of the road Bond.
Sure, but I guess, like, to me, the fact that basically no one has strong opinions about it is a lot of the reason why I have a strong opinion about it, if that makes sense. Like, I can respect a film that is willing to do something that might not be well received by a lot of people. There's a certain courage that it takes to do something like that just isn't here.
Yeah,
I don't know. That I guess that's
its ambivalence is its own worst enemy.
And I think that's really my kind of final thought is, like, I'll watch it if it's on, but I just kind of quietly get angry just because I think about what it could have been had they had the guts to take the risks that they'd taken with some of the previous films.
I feel like in college, and Garrett, you can confirm or deny this, was this the Roger Moore film that I probably played the most in the apartment?
Probably. It's hard to know because as soon as it would come on, I would just leave the room. But
yeah, there you have it. Well, we'll be back next time with honestly, if this isn't the beginning of the end for Roger Moore, then the next film certainly is.
Yeah.
1983's I just love the title, Octopussy. I just love that they managed to name a fucking major Hollywood foreign film fucking Octopussy. Anyway, this has been another installment from Geek Out with Love. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
I'm Rich.
I'm Garrett.
Goodbye, James Bond.
Oh ho ho! We meet again, Mr. Bond. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you expect me to talk over him?
No, I expect you to die.
I'm turning into Kermit.
No, I expect you to die. Ah! Burn your dick off, 007. Free tonight.
Hey, we got a real good one. It's For Your Eyes Only. It's the most serious of Roger Moore's. Sir Roger Moore's ideas. Who are you? I'm Pussy Galore. I must be dreaming. Hey, have a nice honeymoon! Yeah! For England, James? No. For me. Yeah! 007, reporting for duty.
Think on your sins.
Hey, tricks.
Yeah, think on your sins, Em. As I blow up MI6. Yeah! Whatever it was, it must have scared the living daylights out of her. Yeah!
Their bodies are getting warmer.
Keeping the British end.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
Keeping the British.
Yeah, keeping the British end up.
Oh, he's like,
Hey, I'm afraid you missed 007. Did I?
a dead fucking Muppet falls from a tree. dead Muppet.
Fozzie Bear falls out of the tree.
Yeah.
Waka waka.
Yeah.
Hey, names are for tombstones, baby.
Did you touch her?
Yeah.
Yeah, I stole her virginity and fucked her life over. That's the live and the die.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.